How's it going, friends? I'm very excited to share this video with you today. This is an idea that literally just got taken directly from a conversation that I was having with some potential new clients. They're a ways out, but they basically said, you know, this is what I Googled to find us on this YouTube channel. And I said, maybe I should make a video that answers that exact question rather than sort of beating around the bush, which is basically, how do I pick a neighborhood in the Twin Cities? Supposedly they typed that into Google, that brought them to Reddit, which then brought them to our YouTube channel. But maybe somebody can type that question into Google or YouTube and find this video, and I can begin to help you I don't know, figure out how to think about the Twin Cities when you're looking at it on a map or a home search app or something like that. Shall we? Let's dive in. How is it going, my friends? My name is Jesse Lynch, and I run the hardest working real estate team in the game. We're called To the Twin Cities, and you can check out our website, tothetwincities.com. But this YouTube channel is here for you. It's a resource to help you, whether you are buying a house for the first time or relocating to the Twin Cities from a different city, state, country, planet, dimension, and also now for home sellers who are trying to find a great place to list their home. If you have been paying attention to the channel recently, maybe you've seen some of that. But if any of that appeals to you, first-time home buyers, relocations, and home tours, which I guess fits into kind of both subcategory, then do me a favor, do yourself a favor, subscribe to this channel, click the little bell so you can get notified when we put these videos out. And if you wouldn't mind, give the video a thumbs up, say something nice or clever or funny or whatever in the comments. I would appreciate that very, very much. And as always, if you're thinking about moving to the Twin Cities, get a hold of us. We will crush it for you. Nobody will work harder for you than we will. So you can go to our website, tothetwincities.com. We have a contact form there that you can fill out in like 30 seconds or less, or you can shoot us an email directly to info@tothetwincities.com. They lead to the same inbox, so it's totally up to you how you do it. We just ask that you do, and we look forward to it. Look forward to, you know, helping you make this all happen. What do you say? Let's dive into this video. How to pick a neighborhood, how to choose a neighborhood in the Twin Cities. The Twin Cities metropolitan area is quite large. It's, you know, not LA or New York or anything like that, but it is very big, and on a map it's kind of deceivingly large. I think people have a difficult time understanding how far things are away from one another. So if that's you, hey, hopefully this video helps, and of course reach out and we can begin to give you some frame of reference for some of that stuff. And helping people relocate and settle on a neighborhood is something that we are very good at. And as realtors, we can't steer you based on protected classes. And there are several protected classes. And I'm not gonna, I don't care to dive into those right now, but we know what they are. And we are very conscious to not steer people based on those things. And in fact, I don't even think that steering based on those things would be helpful, right? I'm a firm believer in sort of getting to the core of what you want out of a neighborhood. And these protected classes are very rarely like the important thing. It's more about what do you want in your lifestyle, the experience, and all that. So we're gonna dive into what are the different things and how should you begin to think about, and I guess kind of cross things off the list depending on what is important to you. I think it's a fairly new phenomenon for somebody to be able to move somewhere and not be tied to anything geographically at all. It's a very like work from home kind of situation, but that is a very common thing that we have people who are moving here. They have maybe a job in the cities, or maybe they have a job in a totally different state, and they can work from home no matter what. But obviously a lot of people still do have to, you know, have access to a job, even if it's like a hybrid situation where it's 2 times a week or something like that. You still want it to be, you know, not a total drag to drive there a couple days a week. So are you geographically tied to anything, specifically work? Sometimes it's family or just like a friend, right? Maybe you're moving here from, I don't know, a different country, but you're like, I have a very good friend who lives in such and such city. Well, cool. Then you probably don't want to be across town from them, right? So being relatively close to them would probably be a benefit to you. So that's the big one. You know, are you geographically tied to anything? And how far of a drive from that geographic destination do you need to be, you know, within, right? Is it a half an hour from work? Do you work in downtown Minneapolis? Is it a half hour from there? Okay, cool. That gives you sort of an approximate ring that you should be considering. Is it half an hour from St. Paul? Is it half an hour from Minnetonka or, I don't know, Lino Lakes or something like that? Then you can sort of draw a radius there and then begin to cross off things that don't fit your criteria based on that. And one thing I want to note is that we often help people from the East and West Coast who are moving here for better, you know, quality of life or whatever. And one thing that I sort of marvel at is people from like the likes of an LA or San Francisco, Seattle, maybe like a New York or something like that, are used to very long drive times for their commutes. I've had people say, I commute 2 hours each way to work 5 days a week. That, first of all, that's stunning to me. I drive a lot, but I can't imagine the same commute 2 hours each way, like ad infinitum, right? I'm doing an hour and a half drive up to a cabin that I'm working on right now, and that is that's a lot of time in the car. But the big difference I think between a lot of those places and here is that 2 hours in the car gets you to Duluth, right? It gets you so far from the Twin Cities that you're basically in a totally different like metropolitan area. I think a lot of people are used to, you know, an hour-long drive in LA being like, you know, 5 to 10 miles or something like that. Here, an hour-long drive is like 50 miles. So that whole like mileage on your car situation gets pretty extreme, and very few people actually want to be doing that. People are like, all right, if I have to sit in traffic for that long, that's one thing, but the reality is traffic here in the Twin Cities is not that bad. So you get a much further distance than what some people are used to. So let's quick dive into a map. I'm gonna pull up my computer and we can talk through, you know, like what are some of these distances when you're looking at the Twin Cities, right? Okay, so here's a map view of the Twin Cities. If you've been watching our lives, by the way, you might see that we've been doing this quite a bit, and I think it's been helpful to people. So again, here's the Twin Cities. You have Minneapolis and St. Paul. All of this like gray area in the metro is relatively considered the Twin Cities metro, right? Some of these are kind of on the fringes where some people might think of them not quite as the metro, but I would say by and large, if it's in a gray area, it's, you know, considered the metro. Exceptions might be like Jordan, New Prague, Elko, Northfield, you know, these smaller things. But if it's within this total gray block, it's probably technically within the metro. So quickly, I just pulled up a map of a driving map. Right now, it's not like crazy. It wouldn't be really rush hour right now. It's actually a weekend. I work the weekends. Yes, I do. I pretty much work every day, to be honest, but I enjoy it. So here's a map of like the center of Minnetonka, the suburb, to downtown Minneapolis, and it's only 21 minutes, right? So that's from just about the center, right, of the city. The downtown Minneapolis is almost the center of the metro because of how it's laid out with the river and the border of Wisconsin. But yeah, so 21 minutes from the center of Minnetonka to downtown Minneapolis. And then if you were to pull that, let's say like Victoria, that turns into, Victoria is very much on the edge of the metro, and that's a 31-minute drive. So I think a lot of people are thinking, I want to be within a half an hour of a downtown, whether it's downtown Minneapolis or downtown St. Paul. If you are geographically tied to one of the two, cool, good to know. But if you just want access to one of those downtowns for cultural events or concerts or sports events or something like that, then you can, you know, basically you can just do this, but know that just about this whole area in gray will be about 31 minutes from a downtown area. But just know that when you pull up a Google map and it's all this gray, pretty much most of that gray area will be within about 30 minutes to downtown. I'll show you the same Lakeville, right on the southern border. Lakeville is pretty much the southern edge of the Twin Cities Metro. Actually, where my first job ever, Lakeville Family Restaurant, is, unless you count my paper route in Elko Newmarket when I was like 12. Thanks, Mom. But nonetheless, the center of Lakeville, just about 31 minutes to downtown Minneapolis. And if I even brought it closer to 35W, it gets even shorter, right? That's like a 25-minute drive from, basically the very southern edge up to the center of downtown Minneapolis. So 25 minutes, not too shabby. Now, if we go from the northern part of this, I would say this is where maybe like a Bethel. I haven't done this yet, but I'm interested to see what the distance is from Bethel. Okay, 41 minutes from Bethel to downtown Minneapolis. So that the northern metro starts to pull away a little bit in distance and in overall time, partially because it's, you're taking a smaller highway. You're taking Highway 65, which is a little bit slower, which, by the way, Mora, right there, shout out to Mora. That's where the cabin that I'm working on is. But so 41 minutes from downtown Minneapolis to Bethel. If I were to pull Bethel, let's say to Elk River over here, that is going to be 35 minutes. So even though it almost looks like maybe an equal distance, because you're taking more primary highways, that's going to be a little bit less time depending on traffic, of course. And now we have videos on Elk River. We have a video on, let's say, Albertville. I'll pull that up. Again, just over 30 minutes from Albertville or St. Michael to downtown Minneapolis. That's, again, the edge of the metro. We've helped folks move to Delano, have people who live in Rockford, Buffalo even. Buffalo is probably closer to that 45-minute mark, again, partly because this is a smaller highway. Let's do it just for fun. Buffalo, Minnesota to downtown Minneapolis, 46 minutes. Nailed it. Kids got it. And now, I said this earlier, but Minneapolis is a little more central to the metro than St. Paul, right? We are based out of Minneapolis, and that's a big part of why, is it's just so central to cover the entire metro like we do. So even the likes of this, a Stillwater way over on the eastern edge, is going to be just a little over half an hour from downtown Minneapolis. 33 minutes, not bad at all. And so let's say from St. Paul, it's going to be pretty good. 23 minutes from Stillwater, which is pretty much the eastern edge, to St. Paul. Now maybe let's pull it up to Scandia. I'm going to say Scandia is going to be a little further away. Scandia, but only 35 minutes from Scandia to downtown St. Paul. So you can kind of see, like, just about the whole metro, just about everything in gray here is going to be, give or take, within 40 minutes of a downtown, right? And the huge majority of homes are going to be within a half hour or so. And again, I know that a lot of people are working from home and maybe aren't commuting every single day. Actually, the traffic in the Twin Cities is, you can kind of tell, it's pretty easy breezy. And some people are like, oh, access to downtown, it doesn't make sense after 2020, but it does. Like, people still want to go downtown to, again, see sporting events, see a concert, go to like specific restaurants or, specific cultural outings. A downtown is still a downtown, and that people still want access to that, even if you only go occasionally. So now you've determined, what you're tied to geographically and what does that mean for, you making the move and where you want to end up. And so while pretty much, everywhere in the metro is about, 30, 35 minutes from one of the downtowns, what you'll find is if you're tied to one, area more than the other, then certain areas will be off limits, right? So let's say you actually have to drive to St. Paul or Woodbury, which are on the eastern side of the metro. Then the super far western side of the metro, like let's say like a Delano, maybe like an Orono or something around Lake Minnetonka, while sure you could make the drive, that is going to be a pretty hefty drive, partially because you're driving all the way through downtown. So during a rush hour, that's going to be, more intense. But even without, too much traffic, that is going to be a pretty long drive. So again, sorry, now you've determined what you're tied to geographically. I would say a next like important step or question to answer yourself, if this has a specific answer, but what type of home are you looking for? And I say that because if you are looking for a very specific type of home, there are only certain areas that that's going to be. Right. If you have no, you're totally impartial to like home style, well then okay, that opens up the whole metro, right? But we do help a good amount of people who are looking for a specific type of home. And I don't mean anything but like the actual physical home, right? So let's say you're looking for like an old home with character, a craftsman, a bungalow, a Tudor, a Victorian, something like that. Cool. I love those homes. You're speaking my language. Frankly, I like a lot of architecture. There's a lot of it that speaks to me, and there's a little bit of where I'm just like, I don't know. That doesn't excite me that much. But if you're looking for those older homes with like lots of that old kind of charm character, and because the expansion of the metro, it typically was from the city outward, what you'll find is those old homes are going to be in the city proper, but even on the edges, you'll start to get post-war era, so like 1940s or later, and then even maybe on the fringes again, you'll run into like a mid-century modern style, 1950s, 1960s, but mostly 1950s, right on the edges. So if you want the character, it's going to be in the city proper, or there's a few exceptions, which are, I think of them as what once were just small towns on the perimeter of the city, right? Things that have existed for a long time outside the city. Maybe they're farming communities or recreational communities or something like that. And a few of them come to mind: Stillwater, Hastings, Northfield, Chaska, Wayzata, Anoka, White Bear, like White Bear Lake. Things like those, where they once used to just be sort of like satellite towns, and they've had, enough time, where they've been around long enough to have gone through those phases of homes built in the early 1900s, Stillwater even like late 1800s. But those exist, they're still there, they're still well taken care of, some of them. And obviously we'll get to lifestyle in a second, but if like those are the things that are important, is the style of home, then you can consider those satellite cities or the city itself. There might be the occasional, and we can help you, if we set up an email, or we can help you set up like, pre-1940s, right? If that's what's important to you, a certain style of home, we can filter it so it's pre-1940, pre-1945 or something like that. And that way you're only seeing homes built of a certain era that, maybe have a character that you're looking for. And let's say you're looking for mid-century, right, or post-war or mid-century, then really what you're going to be looking, again, like I said, on the just on the outsides of the city proper, right? So the very southern, western, northern borders of Minneapolis and St. Paul proper might have some of that stuff. But then that first ring of suburbs as well will have pretty much, that's where you're going to find most of the mid-century homes. So pretty much that is where the post-war era homes are going to be, and then maybe, somewhere mixed in there or just slightly further out will be the mid-century modern homes. So, post-war era, there's a lot of those homes in the Twin Cities metro. All right, so again, you figured out where you are tied to geographically. Apologies for the redundancy, but we're going to dive into a map, and I'm going to talk through kind of the next step, which I would say, if you're looking for a specific style, a specific sort of aesthetic, or a specific character of home, right? We help a good amount of people who are looking for like an older home with with a lot of character, which you're speaking my language. The reality is I like a lot of different architecture. There's a few styles of architecture that don't excite me, but I really have, I just enjoy architecture. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a builder, then I wanted to be an architect, and now here I am, a real estate agent. So back into the map. So if you're looking for an older home, like a Tudor, a bungalow, a craftsman, a Victorian, something like that, the reality is there's only a few places in the Twin Cities to get them. There are a lot of them, but there's certain areas where you just won't find them, right, because of when things were being built. So the majority of that character, the majority of those eras of home, which I would say is like pre-1940 or so, is going to be in Minneapolis proper, St. Paul proper, right? That's a huge majority. And even on the edges, right? Even, let's say, right around the 62 mark, right around the river, maybe closer to, as you get out to Maplewood, closer to Roseville, closer to Columbia Heights and Robbinsdale and Brooklyn Center over here. you'll start to find that those homes start to be post-war, maybe even some mid-century modern in there as well. But it doesn't, not too far in, and you have homes that are pre-1940, craftsman, bungalows, Victorian, Tudor, and all that kind of thing. But there are some exceptions as you go out. I think of these as more like satellite towns or satellite, old cities from back in the day. A city might be, I don't know, slightly generous, but these like things that used to just sort of stand on their own as like satellite towns around the metro, where you can find, they've had kind of long enough history that you can find homes that were built in those eras. So the main ones that come to mind, feel free to leave a comment if you have any that I missed, but Stillwater, it's a big one. A lot of really beautiful homes. In fact, some of the oldest homes in Minnesota were built in Stillwater. Again, same goes for Hastings. Partly because of proximity to the river, partly because they're just really far east. These are two of the oldest cities or towns, like I said, in all of the Twin Cities. So those are two big ones. But you'll also find like White Bear Lake. It has some older homes around the lake. It used to be this like very sort of sought after like cabin area, which is pretty crazy because now it's full on suburb. But there are some really beautiful homes, especially around the lake, especially kind of in this like downtown corridor near the lake. Some really beautiful homes. Now again, kind of coming back out, maybe some older homes in the likes of a Prior Lake. You're going to find some in downtown Chaska. As you come up here, the likes of like an Excelsior. Excelsior, I love Excelsior. It's so pretty. And in this kind of downtown core, you'll find, downtown core, again, you'll find some beautiful older homes. Wayzata has some beautiful older homes. And then as you kind of come up north here, the likes of an Anoka, you'll find some really great, charming older homes here. It's also the Halloween capital of the world or something like that in Anoka, which is pretty fun. And I believe that is the majority of where you'll find those, pre-1940s homes. And so then let's say you want like a post-war era home. So that, 1940, and I know that's not really post-war, but 1940 to maybe a mid-century home, right? We do have a lot of post-war inventory in the Twin Cities and some great mid-century, but I almost think like stylistically mid-century wasn't huge here. I'm not sure why, but it wasn't like quite as much of a thing as maybe you'll find in like California or something like that. I don't really know why, but we do have some really beautiful mid-century homes. But I've been places where it's like whole neighborhoods where you're like, oh, that house would be quite rare in the Twin Cities, and you have whole neighborhoods just absolutely full of them. So again, for that sort of 1940s to maybe 1965 era, you're going to want to look at around the first ring suburbs about, right? Richfield, Edina, Hopkins, St. Louis Park, some of Minnetonka. Golden Valley actually has, I think, some of the most beautiful examples of mid-century homes in the Twin Cities. A little bit in Robbinsdale, not much. Some Ramblers and stuff in Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. New Hope, actually have a listing coming up soon. In New Hope, it's really cool. Sort of a split entry, tuck under garage, mid-century. So cool. Excited. We'll have a video on this channel. So excited to share that with y'all. Super cool. Columbia Heights is mostly a post-war era style home. St. Anthony, a little bit more of the mid-century modern. It's a little more affluent, a little more money in St. Anthony than a Columbia Heights. Roseville, Falcon Heights, you might find some mid-century and post-war stuff. Again, just this kind of first ring of suburbs. Oakdale, Maplewood, a little bit there. Maybe in North St. Paul. Woodbury, I would say not so much. Woodbury is a little newer of a community. Cottage Grove, a little newer of a community. Inver Grove, a little bit there. It's just not that big of a spot. Some in Mendota, Mendota Heights, a little tiny bit in Eagan, but I would say mostly, the north side of the river and kind of along that first ring. Bloomington has some great like starter homes that are post-war and maybe like 1950s built. But that's the big stuff. And then also actually Burnsville has some very cool mid-century modern homes as well. And then I think you can see a trend, right? The development tends to be center out, right? That makes a lot of sense. And because of how our metro is structured, it can just kind of continue to go out evenly, relatively evenly, because there's not some huge geographical border, right? I would say then kind of the next section or the next like classification of home styles that people really start, this is no slight against this era of homes. I grew up in one. We've never had anybody say like, I really want a home built in the 1970s or the 1980s. Again, like that's not to say anything about that. Again, I grew up, that nobody has ever said that. That's not like a style that is like really, really sought after right now. Now, people buy those homes all the time, and those homes trade hands just the same as others, but that is not necessarily a thing that people are really after. However, some people are after homes built after 1978 for health reasons, for safety reasons. Basically, 1978 is when lead-based paint became like outlawed, like literally you're not supposed to use it at all. And also things like asbestos were like, hey, let's not do that. That's actually not safe at all to have in your home. So 1978 and later in Minnesota, I think in all of the US, if you are buying a home that was built previous to 1978, there has to be some kind of a disclosure about the potential existence of lead and lead-based paint in that home. Because again, it had been dangerous and it's not good. But that said, tons of homes have it in the Twin Cities. I live in a home pre-1978 right now, and I personally, it's within my risk tolerance that that I understand that's in there. It's under multiple layers of paint. This isn't health advice or whatever. But if you are not comfortable with that, then you want to make sure that the home was built after 1978, because then, in theory, there shouldn't be any lead-based paint anywhere in that home. And so if you're looking for something post-1978, there will be some of these sprinkled all throughout the metro, right? If there just happen to be a lot and somebody built something more recently, you'll see them in Minneapolis proper. People are scraping some homes occasionally and putting in brand new homes, and they've been doing that for decades now, right? So you could find something in the city. You'll pay usually a bit of a premium for a new build home in the city. It's going to be more expensive than an older home, but it's going to be probably pretty cool. So if that's the goal, then you're probably going to want to be in like the second ring of suburbs, which I know is somewhat abstract to a lot of people, but to give that like an identity, I would say, if you're looking at like Eden Prairie, I would call that a second ring suburb. Bloomington is kind of a second ring suburb, but Bloomington is also very huge. So maybe Western Bloomington is where you'll start to find homes that were post 1978. Certainly Burnsville, Apple Valley, Eagan, Rosemont, Inver Grove, Cottage Grove, Woodbury, Lake Elmo, Matamidi, White Bear Lake, Shoreview, right? So kind of this ring of 694 that kind of goes all the way around here, then 494, kind of all the way around here. As a rough rule, to be newer than that era, you're going to want to be on the outside of this 494 and 694 ring. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. But that is the reality of pretty much that's when like that next level, that next like era of homes and neighborhoods started to happen. And then let's say you're looking for a new build home, right? The reality is most new builds, while again, you will see some sprinkled all throughout the metro. There are neighborhoods in Minneapolis and St. Paul proper where you'll see the occasional new build popping up. I would say more so in Minneapolis proper. The southwest neighborhood of Minneapolis, you'll see people scraping like smaller, more modest homes, specifically in like an Armitage or a Kenny, which let me see, yep, Armitage or Kenny in these two neighborhoods. We're seeing quite a bit of that, maybe a little bit in Fulton, a little bit in Windham, and occasionally in a Linden Hills kind of neighborhood as well. And then you'll maybe see the occasional scrape and new build in this Nokomis area. I would say more sparse in Powderhorn, more sparse in Uptown, because they tend to be more renter dense areas, right? Both like this Uptown or Calhoun Isles neighborhood and Powderhorn. Same with Phillips. And then you'll start to see some, again, in this like Longfellow neighborhood or the Longfellow community, So Cooper, Howe, Minnehaha, right? We're starting to see new builds pop up there. And then the occasional new build, maybe in Northeast, the occasional new build in like Mac Groveland or Highland Park. But that is the majority of where you'll see new builds within the city proper. And then you can go to the likes of an Edina. People will pay good money to be in Edina, so there'll be new builds. And again, sprinkled kind of all throughout the metro will be the occasional new build home, maybe the occasional smaller development. But if you're looking for like reliably, like where are the new builds, it's going to be on the edges of the metro, right? There are some great new build homes in Cottage Grove, great new build homes in Lakeville. You'll see new builds in Shakopee, quite a few going on in this like Hanover, Corcoran, St. Michael, Albertville, Otsego area, Ramsey, Andover, St. Francis. I've seen some kind of in this Hugo, north of Hugo area, some new builds going up Ham Lake. And yeah, Lake Elmo as well. That's where kind of like the path of progress is. That's kind of where it's reached, is kind of on that edge. And so that's where you're starting to see more and more new build communities come up. So if a new build is something you're after, that's kind of where I would be looking. Again, you can just use an app probably, as long as you're not using some bad app. Again, most apps are going to have like a year where you can say, you know, built newer than 2022 or 2021, and that will show you new build listings, maybe to be built, maybe available. But yeah, again, happy to help you with any of that. And then lastly, I would say is luxury homes. You know, are you looking for a luxury home, and what do you qualify as a luxury home? Some people, I think, because they're new and shiny, think just like new builds are luxury. That's not really the case. There's sort of like an upper echelon. You can have old homes that are luxury homes, and there are neighborhoods and there are suburbs that are maybe more known for luxury homes throughout the metro. Again, you could probably just set a price threshold and it would eliminate any home that isn't a luxury home. And that might show you like where are these, you know, luxury style homes. But there's quite a few potential spots. Let's go into the city proper first. I would say mostly to the extent you'll find a luxury home in St. Paul, it would probably be in this Summit Hill neighborhood, okay, over here. Maybe some Summit University, maybe some Cathedral Hill. Again, maybe McAllister Groveland, especially along this river. Anytime you're on a body of water, there's a good chance you're going to find some pretty epic homes. And for sure, along the Mississippi River, this is just a beautiful bluff along the western side of Mac Groveland and Highland Park. Again, Highland Park, the occasional like luxury but older home you'll find in Highland Park. Same with McAllister Groveland. And then the only other spot really that I think would come to mind for potential luxury would be in Como Park, maybe like on Lake Como. Okay, and then over to Minneapolis, where you might find some luxury homes. I would say, again, along the river here, right? You'll definitely some beautiful homes over in like the Cooper and Howe neighborhood. You might find some what might be qualified as luxury homes around Lake Nokomis. Also, right along here is the Minnehaha Creek Parkway, right? So right along here, this green space with this river, this is Minnehaha Creek Park. The road, you know, this is a parkway that runs just to the south of it. Well, I guess it intertangles really all throughout Minneapolis, but you will find some really beautiful, like high-end luxury style homes going along that parkway. They're going to be older almost always, and I would say they get maybe a little more epic closer to the lake. And then again, as you cross 35W, you go into Tangletown, you go into Lyndhurst, there's going to be some pretty extravagant homes there as well. And again, where you're going to find luxury homes in Minnesota very often is around water features. So lakes, Bedamakoska, Lake Harriet, there's some stunning homes surrounding that, as well as Cedar Lake, some really gorgeous homes over here. And of course, Lake of the Isles. Some of my favorite architecture is around Lake of the Isles and between Lake of the Isles and Cedar Lake, which is in the neighborhood Kenwood. I think there are really beautiful architectural examples in Kenwood and in Cedar Isles Dean. Now again, maybe you want a condo. There's definitely luxury condos in downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. The Warehouse District is going to have some. The Mill District, so like by Gold Medal Park, in downtown East by Mill City Museum, some really beautiful condos there. Just across the Stone Arch Bridge, kind of by Cafe Alma over here, along Main, there's some really, again, gorgeous homes with crazy views of downtown. This is downtown, this is a river. If you have a condo here facing downtown and the river, that's like some of the coolest sight lines that you will find in Minneapolis. Bryn Mawr has some really beautiful homes, as well as, you know, places like this Cedarhurst, Lake Forest, Fern Hill in St. Louis Park. Some crazy beautiful homes there as well. Edina is going to have luxury homes. Some of West Bloomington might qualify as a luxury home. Eden Prairie will have some homes that are, you know, into that luxury echelon, especially if you're anywhere near water. And then I would say probably the most reliable spot to find luxury homes will be around this Lake Minnetonka here, just about anywhere, especially if it's on Lake Minnetonka proper. You're gonna find gorgeous, like epic homes. This is some of the most expensive real estate in the Twin Cities, and for good reason. Lake Minnetonka is like an awesome lake, very accessible and very recreational, right? It's probably the most popular recreational lake in the Twin Cities metro. But I mean, when I say anywhere around it, I mean anywhere. Wayzata, for sure, some gorgeous homes in Wayzata. But Orono, Long Lake, Minnetonka Beach, Deep Haven, Greenwood, Excelsior. I love Excelsior. Very cute, very charming. Minnetonka proper, right? Some of this is actually Minnetonka proper. Shorewood, Mound, Spring Park, Minnetrista, St. Bonifacius. Some of that, I believe, borders here. And you can see it's like a pretty intense chain of lakes, but connected and really cool. So let's come out of the map now and let's talk lifestyle. So we have, you know, are you tied to anything geographically? We have what type of home are you looking for? And next up I would say is what lifestyle are you looking for? Very often people have like very polar ideas about what they want. Some people want, you know, a very rural lifestyle. They want to be out in the middle of nowhere. They don't want to be able to see a neighbor from their house. Totally understand that. Some people want to be in a very, very suburban area where they feel like it's a community where they can find friends. If they have kids, maybe they can find friends, and things are relatively accessible. Getting to a grocery store is maybe 5 minutes rather than 20 or something like that. And some people take the suburban lifestyle ideal to an even greater extent, or they want to be in a very planned suburban, you know, development where there's maybe like a rec center specifically for that community, which by the way tend to be in like an upper echelon of price ranges. I would say maybe like 800,000 or so. Although I suppose you can probably find new builds closer to 6 where there's something like that. But yeah, if you're looking for, you know, a rec center for a relatively small neighborhood that has like a pool and like event space or something like that, you're probably going to be paying a little bit more. And there's a few that come to mind, like Branchin Farms or Stonehill Farms in Woodbury. Branchin Farms is in Lakeville, and that kind of thing. And then there's things like gated communities. There are, you know, golf course, country club communities where you like automatically have access to a golf course. Those are very, very specific lifestyles that if you're looking for, we can definitely help you with. But, you know, you got to know, like, is that a priority to you? And if it is, cool. Then that really kind of limits what homes you're going to even be considering. But that can be a good thing. And then, of course, there's people who want to live in the city and people who want to be in, you know, maybe a quiet neighborhood of the city, maybe a real bustling neighborhood of the city, right? Right now, I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood in the city. Just before this, I lived in downtown. I loved both of them. So I don't think there's like any wrong answers, but it's like, what are you looking for? There maybe are wrong answers in the sense of things that are fundamentally impossible to achieve, right? One big thing that we find with lifestyle is people are looking for, if they're trying to live in the city or really anywhere, one of the things they're after is like walkability to shops and restaurants and like a cafe or something like that. Most people will sort of concede the idea of like, they don't need to be close to like 20 restaurants, but being walkable to 2 or 3 sounds really nice, right? But so if you want to be like in the thick of it where you can walk to everything, Okay, cool. That limits, what would be in the cards. Actually, conveniently, very much so, it pretty much directly ties in with those older homes pre-1940s, right? So all of those areas we talked about, Minneapolis and St. Paul proper, and then those satellite cities, that's pretty much where you're going to be able to find, a home in like a neighborhood that's small enough or sort of dense enough to where you could walk to a cafe, a restaurant, a coffee shop, something like that. So again, if that walkability is something you're after, Minneapolis or St. Paul proper, and there's a ton of neighborhoods within that would qualify, most of it, right, would qualify for relatively walkable to a shop or restaurant, or a few, in some areas, to a ton, like an uptown, like a downtown, a North Loop, something like that. And then again, if you get kind of on the outskirts to those satellite cities, Stillwater, Hastings, Northfield, Wayzata, Excelsior, Chaska, Anoka, those places that are kind of standalone little cities with like a little life of their own, you might be able to have an older home that's walkable. You also might be able to have like a new home there that's walkable, specifically probably more so in like an Excelsior or a Wayzata, maybe a Stillwater, where somebody has scraped an old home and put a new home there. But that's going to be a little harder to find. If you were like, that's what I want, I'd say, well, you might be waiting a while, or you might just want to do the scrape yourself, right? You might want to just hire a contractor and find a home that needs to be scraped, right? So ultimately, you got to figure out, like, what are you looking for? And some people are like, I would be open to all of it. And I get that. That's okay. You're just like, depends on the house, right? If I could find a cool old house with a ton of character, walkable to shops, that feels like a real peaceful neighborhood, then maybe that would be perfect for me. But I also like the idea of living in like a chill suburb, maybe not a planned community, something like that. And it's like, all right, I could see how those could both appeal to a person. Maybe they want, mid-century in like a Golden Valley, or they would also consider, a 1920s built home in Southwest Minneapolis. Or maybe they want, an 1890s built home in Summit Hill, if it's just like immaculately renovated, or they want a luxury new build in like a Woodbury or something like that, right? For sure, these things happen, and we help people who are open to any of those things, or maybe a combination of those things. But that's the question. Is that what you want? And here are the potential areas that could suit it. I think next up in the conversation is schools, right? And I kind of clump schools into maybe like 4 different categories. One is, do you want to be by the elite schools in the Twin Cities? Which, by the way, the Twin Cities have very good schools, right? On the whole, a lot of the folks who are coming here that we're helping, they care about schools. Whether they have kids or not, they're paying attention to school districts because, maybe they intend to have kids, maybe they do have kids and that's important to them, or maybe they just think it's helpful for resale or something like that. But the reality is, some people don't care about that at all. We've had people who very blatantly are like, that doesn't matter to us. We do not care about public schools at all. I have some clients right now who homeschool, right? And they're like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. We're homeschooling these kids, and we will be for the foreseeable future. We have some people who are like, we don't have kids. We don't ever intend to have kids. And so, other than resale, we don't care. And the reality is, resale can be good even if the schools aren't great, right? There are certain homes, certain areas where maybe the schools aren't rated quite as high, but the resale can be quite good, and certainly the appreciation can be particularly excellent. So do you want elite, right? Do you want top 5 or top 10? You can go to niche.com and just look up like top 10 spots. You'll find a list of here are all the top, schools. But the reality is, once you're just below 10, those schools are still quite good, right? So maybe you want great, excellent schools, but not top 5, not top 10. We've actually helped people, I found this quite endearing, who said, I want schools that are good. I want them to have, access to sports, but I actually want them to be able to play the sports. They're not going to be, my son plays soccer and he's not going to be Messi, right? Okay, I get it. You want them to be able to play, to be able to have fun, to be able to be part of a team and sort of experience that, but you don't want the pressure of them being like, the best of the best. And I totally hear that. And so, that's a question, and that's something worth looking at, is like, here's top 5, top 10. what's immediately below that, you know, and what comes up. And maybe you're like, I would do great, excellent, or elite schools. Any of those would do the trick for me if I find the right house within my budget. And then there are people who, again, they're just like, I just don't want it to be like some of the worst schools in the metro. Again, use something like niche.com, greatschools.org, and, you know, wrap your head around what you decide that is, right? Because, you know, we can just say, here's what niche says, but some people's understanding of like how those are actually rated, they feel differently about how things are weighted in those ratings. And then again, I think there's the people where schools aren't even in the conversation. I would use niche for those things to begin to help, you know, wrap your head around those. We talk about in every video how those things are rated. And I think for most people that becomes pretty clear, you know, like where do they fit into that equation? So again, use those resources. And by the way, we've been thinking about if you're watching this, hey, appreciate you. If you're like at this point, I know we're pretty far into this video, but if you're at this point, hey, how's it going? Just you, it's just you and me. How's it going? I feel like the numbers by this point in this video, you know, as many views as it might get, it can't be that many people. And at any given time, it might just be you and I. So how's it going? Thanks for watching this. And real quick, let's just talk about politics. Personally, I abstain from politics on this channel entirely. I brush over it as much as possible. But some people, when it comes to where they're moving, that's a priority. So this is a map. It's about the 2020 election and how things voted. And this sort of like blue section in the middle, kind of in like the elbow of the state, obviously that's the Twin Cities. You probably know that by now. And it is bluer here than just about anywhere, right? And you'll see the two darkest blue spots in there. That is Hennepin County and Ramsey County, which is home to Minneapolis and St. Paul. You'll see just to the east of Ramsey County is Washington County. Just to the south of that is Dakota County. To the west of that is Scott County. To the west of that is Carver County. This other kind of pinkish spot is Anoka County. And that is the 7-county metro, which is what it used to be back in the day. It was just a 7-county metro. Now our metro is considered an 11-county metro, which includes these 4 slightly more red spots up here, right? We help a huge variety of people, and mostly people don't care too much about, you know, which way it leans in terms of politics. But a good amount of people say they do want to be, you know, in either a like left or right leaning area for whatever reason, right? And so if that's the case, again, this is just a presidential election. This is not indicative necessarily of like the deep, like the, you know, every political opinion of a whole area. And you'll find like the dark blue means it was like 70 to 80% voted Democrat. The light blue means a majority, but not a huge majority, voted Democrat. The pink means a majority, but not a huge majority, voted Republican. And the, you know, again, the slightly less pink means a little bit more. And then these top 4 red means something like, I guess that would be 60 to 70% of folks voted Republican in the 2020 election. So I'm going to abstain from opinion as much as possible and just point out that that's what that is. If you have a preference for, you know, that kind of a thing, then there's some data for you to judge it on. Let's get out of this map, my least favorite map of the whole video. And then let's talk about park spaces and green spaces, because a lot of people, that's a priority. But one thing I will say is that most of Minnesota, most of the Twin Cities, does a really good job of having accessible parks all throughout the metro, and a huge variety of parks, right? You have small municipal parks, you have like, you know, large municipal parks, and then of course there are regional parks, and there's some really great regional parks in the Twin Cities, and, you know, some state parks. There's no national parks in the Twin Cities. There's a national park in Minnesota called Voyagers, which is like right at the tippy top of Minnesota, kind of that weird spot, but it's a really, really beautiful area. Definitely worth a trip. It's a Boundary Waters Canoe Area, BWCA. Yeah, so cool. Just a truly like pristine lake experience. You can canoe and all that. Very cool. Highly recommend. Anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about parks within the city. This is so the metrocouncil.org website has a map of like all of the regional park systems in the Twin Cities. And there are some really, really great regional parks. This map is a little clunky, so I apologize. But within the cities, there's like only kind of a handful within the city proper. Theodore Wirth Park is one that comes to mind. It's on the western edge of like northern Minneapolis, and separates basically Golden Valley from North Minneapolis. Theodore Wirth Park, beautiful park. Then you have the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park, which includes Cedar Lake, Lake of the Isles, Benema-Cosca, and Lake Harriet, and really just gorgeous, gorgeous part of the city. Highly recommend a walk, a run, a bike around these lakes. You can rent boats, you can rent canoes, paddle boats, kayaks, you can paddle board in these places. They do a thing called the Luminary Loppet, which if you haven't looked at that, give that a googs. Very, very cool. Then of course, Nokomis Hiawatha Regional Park, which includes both Lake Nokomis and Hiawatha. And then Minnehaha Regional Park, beautiful. It's home to the largest waterfall in any metropolitan area in North America. Pretty cool. Mississippi Gorge Regional Park, beautiful. Yeah, I could go on. Fort Snelling State Park is also a really great park. Huge area, all along a river, and just, yeah, a great place to go for a walk, take your dog, something like that. But so this is, again, if access to a large park, right, like a particularly huge park, then this is a really, really great resource. I grew up pretty close to Lebanon Hills Regional Park, which connects with the Minnesota Zoo basically, and it's a stunning park. People even though there's not mountain bikes, people will mountain bike through there. Really great trail system, really great lakes and a variety of like beaches and stuff like that through there. Murphy Hannerhan in Savage. Really pretty. I believe I was in there when I was shooting the Savage video. And then of course, as you get kind of out to Lake Minnetonka, Carver Park Reserve, beautiful, beautiful area as well. Baker Park Reserve, I've also been there, also beautiful. You can just see basically like there's a sort of a smattering of these throughout the metro. But again, if access to large parks is important to you, this is a really good resource. Smaller parks, I would just say, like if you're just like, I just want to be able to walk, take my kid there, I would say like, you're pretty much good. That doesn't narrow down really anything because we have a ton of parks in the Twin Cities area. And then we're coming back out of the map, and I think at this point we have a pretty keen understanding, right? You should have been able to eliminate a lot of the areas based on all of these things. If you've done all of this, obviously if we're working with you, we'll probably walk through all of this stuff and be able to give you an idea of like, you know, based on this criteria, what's important to you, where would be good spots that you might want to end up. And then we would probably ask you like, are there any other like random things that are deal breakers to you? The one that I can think of would be being too close to an airport, right? Specifically, most people would be being too close to MSP, which is like the big airport here in the Twin Cities. And we like to explain that there are certain areas where the flight path is going to be worse than others. There are also online resources for where those flight paths go. I live kind of under a flight path, but I'm far enough away that I don't find it particularly disruptive at all. That said, there are some neighborhoods in Eagan and some neighborhoods in Minneapolis proper that I would find it's pretty disruptive, right? If you watch the video that Steve and I did on Linden Hills, Minneapolis, we definitely were like, yeah, that's pretty disruptive. We kept talking, but yeah, you can definitely hear the airplanes to the point where you might want to stop a conversation, right? I would call that pretty disruptive. Maybe not that bad in Linden Hills, but as you get from Linden Hills a little closer to the airport, it gets a little bit worse and a little bit worse. Actually, we're helping a client right now who's like an aircraft controller, and he's like, no, I love planes. Like a plane flying over my house would not be a negative to me at all. But then obviously we've showed people homes that are in a flight path and they're like, holy cow, no way could I live right here. And I get it, it's definitely not for everybody. If you're still watching this, I'd love a comment if you have any deal breakers that I didn't talk about where you're like, this is a deal breaker to me, then let me know, because I'm pretty curious about that. And this video has taken me a long time to shoot, so I really hope it's been helpful. And I hope if you're watching this, you got some value out of it. And just know that if and when you work with us, we'll be able to do this exact thing for you, custom, based on your preferences, and we'll be able to give you just great direction for where you want to be based on this type of criteria. As always, if you haven't done so yet, give this video a thumbs up, say something nice or funny or whatever in the comments. Can you hear that? There's somebody above me. This might be the last video that I shoot in this office, by the way, because we're getting a new office. Pretty snazzy, pretty excited. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.